thin ribbon of copper flashed in the candlelight as Era Kestrel wound it around the glass abdomen of her latest creation. Her workshop, an old granary at the north edge of Brackenvale, was filled with orderly rows of brass gears, numbered sketches, and jars of tiny screws, but all sense of tiny screws but broken by her stimming, a quiet, rhythmic hum that steadied her thoughts. Outside, late summer crickets sung to the moon, but Era was listening to a very different music. Tick. She turned a key no wider than a fingernail. Inside the glass belly, a filament shimmered. Tick, tick. She adjusted a silver filament, aligning it with the miniature stethoscope diaphragm pressed against the mock heart she kept for testing. A pouch of warm water pulsing from a rubber bulb at the work table's edge. Each squeeze produced a thump. Each thump generated light. Perfect. Era took a breath so shallow it could barely be called one. She set the glass belly onto a brass thorax, tightened 2 screws, and clipped on gossamer wings made from bleached locust membranes. At last, she opened her palm. A firefly of brass, glass, and copper rested there, glowing in gentle pulses that matched the beat of her own heart. She smiled the way she always did at the first successful prototype by exhaling sharply through her nose and pressing her thumb against her middle finger. The sensation of nail against callus grounded her. A whole swarm waited on the shelves behind her. 52 mechanical fireflies, each perfected across 6 months, each tuned to synchronize with the heartbeat of a human counterpart. They were as uniform as soldiers at inspection, but as individual as the villagers whose emotions they would soon translate. She had built them because she knew in the deep interior chambers of her mind how it felt not to be able to say what trembled inside the ribcage. Words were brittle things. They shattered at the slightest pressure, at a raised eyebrow and an impatient sigh, the hot fog of others' assumptions. But light, especially light that breathed, was supple. It curved around incomprehension and filled the spaces language left empty. The first step would be persuading the village council to let her demonstrate the swarm on market day. The very thought of standing beneath the linden tree, speaking to neighbors who had never understood why she couldn't meet their eyes, made her stomach fold in on itself. Yet the fireflies could speak for her in a dialect nobody would need to decipher. A soft knock came at the workshop door. 3 taps, pause. 2 taps. The pattern belonged to only one person, Maeve, Era's older sister and, unintentionally, her liaison to the confusing world of other people. "It's late," Maeve said when Era unlatched the door. "You forgot supper again." "I ate crackers and pears at dusk," Era replied. She opened her hand, letting her newest firefly hover just above the threshold like an ember unmoored from wood. Maeve's brown eyes widened. "It's even more beautiful than the last batch, refined antennae." Era flicked a spiral of silver wire, tuned to individual electrical impulses in the body. Better attunement, better empathy. Maeve, who had learned to translate Era's clipped sentences into broader explanations, nodded with pride. "Then you'll show them on market day?" "I wrote a proposal." She gestured to a rolled parchment on her drafting table, but reading it aloud, Mauve's hand touched her shoulder. "I can present. You'll be beside me." Era swallowed, having Mauve buffer her from the barrage of unfiltered eyes and twisting facial expressions would help. But another fear needled her. The possibility of rejection. Inventors in Brackenvale were few. One who barely spoke might be tolerated as an eccentric, but not trusted with the emotional lives of villagers. Still, the fireflies' thoraxes beat patiently against the hush of the granary. Their glow asked her to keep trying. "I accept," Era said, because the glow was reason enough. Market day came with the smell of yeast and cinnamon drifting from the baker's stall. Stands brimmed with potatoes and wools, loaves in lantern oil. Children wove between tables, chasing the chaotic path of real fireflies that danced above the grass. Era walked at Maeve's side, box of clockwork insects cradled to her chest, heartbeat racing. She wore a gray tunic, practical and nondescript, but its seams scratched her skin each time she inhaled, making her want to retreat into the granary's quiet corners. Maeve stopped beneath the council's linden tree. Mayor Ferran, a burly man with a beard divided into 2 braids, turned toward them with polite distraction. 3 other councilors stood by. Era counted their belt buckles instead of meeting their gazes. "Master Kestrel," the mayor addressed Maeve, mistaking her for the inventor. Era raised her hand slightly to correct him, but managed only a croak. Maeve cleared her throat. "I'm Maeve Kestrel. My sister Era is the inventor." Foreign blinked, caught off guard, then gave Era an assessing scan. "Ah, Very well. What have you brought us, Mistress Era? Rehearsals echoed in her head, but the words came out compressed. Devices. Aid emotional communication via biometric light synchronization. She winced, hating how stiff it sounded outside her skull. Maeve stepped in smoothly. Era has crafted mechanical fireflies that use a sensitive diaphragm to detect the tiny vibrations of a person's heartbeat. They glow in real time, matching each pulse when worn on a ribbon near the sternum or on a wristband. They broadcast not just the rate, but subtle variances, flutterings of excitement, steady warmth, spikes of anger or fear. Color filters shift according to rhythm. The result is an outward illumination of inward feeling. While Maeve spoke, Era opened the box. 52 clockwork fireflies rose in a coordinated spiral. Gasps rippled among onlookers. Each insect floated like a living gemstone, wings whirring, bodies pulsing. Era extended her wrist. One firefly settled there. Instantly, it synchronized, throbbing with her racing pulse, but it did more. A faint indigo haze bled through its glass. The hue Era had calibrated to represent anxious alertness. Several villagers drew closer, curiosity overpowering hesitation. Mayor Ferran stroked his beard. Ingenious. Yet what purpose beyond spectacle? People know how they feel. Do they? Maeve asked gently. Ask Rowan, who stammers each time she tries to say she loves her fiancé. Ask old Tannic, who hasn't wept since his daughter passed because he cannot broach the first syllable of grief. Our words fail us. We fail each other. Let light speak where tongues falter. Rowan, a flax-hailed seamstress, happened to be nearby. Emboldened, or perhaps embarrassed, she stepped forward. Let me try. Ere I selected a firefly, cupped it until it attuned itself. When she placed it against Rowan's breastbone, the insect glowed pink at first, then deepened to roseate gold. Its pulses sped up, slowed, then quickened again, painting an aurora across translucent wings. Rowan's cheeks burned. She pivoted toward her fiancé, Charette, a leather worker idling by the tannery stall. The firefly's light leapt in intensity. Charette stared, tears filling his eyes. He crossed the square at a run and hugged Rowan without a single spoken word. A hush settled beneath the linden branches. Mayor Ferran cleared his throat. Effective demonstration, but how long do they last? 100-hour charge per winding? Ira said quickly, relieved to answer something technical. Gears of tempered brass. Wings replaceable after 2 years. Foreign exchanged glances with fellow counselors. Very well. We grant permission to distribute them on trial basis. 1 per household. After a month, we convene to assess benefit and risks. Era exhaled, dizzy with triumph, and the chatter suddenly aimed at her. She signaled to Maeve, who understood and guided her to a quieter bench while villagers queued for fireflies. That evening, Brackenvale shimmered. Fireflies tucked into scarf folds, pinned to lapels, perched on window ledges. Couples walked in halos of overlapping luminescence. Friends clustered around tavern tables, eyes shining with unsaid admissions laid bare in shifting hues. A young blacksmith who rarely spoke above a grunt entered the Reading Goat pub with a firefly drumming neon yellow against his collarbone. And within minutes, patrons learned he felt unstoppable pride in the new horseshoe design, cooling in his forge. They toasted him until yellow blended with overwhelmed gratitude. From her workshop window, Ira watched. Each circly spark validated countless solitary hours spent arranging springs and listening to her heartbeat under layers of solder fume. Yet a strange ache blossomed inside her, an emptiness hidden beneath accomplishment. She could give others a lexicon of color, but she still lacked a straightforward way to fit herself into their conversations. She understood hearts but struggled with faces. The ache subsided when she returned to her drafting table. A blank design sheet waited. She began sketching a docky nest where fireflies could rest and recharge, singing softly as lines became shapes. For 2 weeks, harmony reigned. Arguments cooled before erupting because anger glowed scarlet, impossible to deny or project outward. Shy affections glimmered, peach before words made them awkward. Even the baker's deaf son used his firefly's pulses as a metronome for rhythmically signing jokes that left his customers in stitches. But on the 15th day, the first complaint arrived at the council door. Mrs. Molnar, the miller's wife, accused her neighbor of using the fireflies to pry. She watched mine turn violet and assumed I fancied her husband. Others claimed the devices intensified feelings, that seeing one's shame bright as sunset crimson invited ridicule. And though villagers could tuck the insects away, discipline wavered. Curiosity was a strong solvent. Mayor Foran summoned Ira and Maeve to an emergency meeting. Ira's stomach twisted. She brought her diagrams and a toolbox of spare parts, as if polite engineering could quell social storms. She found 20 angry townsfolk crammed inside the meeting hall, their fireflies strobing an anxious rainbow. A farmer shouted, "These things are lanterns on our secrets." A fisherman countered, "They kept my brother from drinking himself blind because we saw his despair before he spoke of it." Voices clashed, colors flashed. Ira's mind retreated to calculations. 15 heartbeats per second inside the room times the number of bodies equals a collective cacophony impossible to parse. She pressed her palms over her ears, rocking slightly. Maeve noticed. She stepped forward, voice firm. "Quiet." It took 3 repetitions, but the room settled into ragged hush. "My sister cannot easily stand this noise. If you wish to condemn her gift, do so with calmer hearts." A confession tore from Rowan, the seamstress. "The fireflies helped me, yet I also felt invaded. Love is voluntary vulnerability. These things force it." Mayor Ferran eyed Ira. "You built a marvel, Mistress Kestrel, but perhaps the village is not ready. Can you modify them?" Ira lowered her hand slowly. "Add privacy toggle," she managed. "User places thumb on thorax, light dampens to neutral. Still monitors, but no outward display." She produced a prototype whose glow faded to pearl once she pressed its back. Murmurs rippled. Some faces softened. "Introduce dampening to existing units," the mayor said. "1 week, else we rescind permit." Ira nodded, though dread poured through her nerves. 52 units times 1 week equaled frantic labor she wasn't sure she could sustain, not without sacrificing the stabilization rituals that kept her functional. Back at the granary, she lined the swarm on the bench. To retrofit each insect, she must replace the central cam with a clutch mechanism and install a pressure disc. The pattern was simple, but repetition risked mistakes if sensory overload derailed her focus. Maeve arrived with boiled tea and a pillow for kneeling. "Let me help." "You don't have the training," Ira said, turning a gear set. "I can hand you parts in sequence, check for misalignments. Keep chatter away." "You'll keep the rhythm." Ira's shoulders eased. "Yes, that would help." 4 nights blurred into one. They worked by oil lamps, Ira's hum mingling with Maeve's whispered counts. Bridge gear, clutch plate, axle screw 1, 2, 3. When exhaustion pricked at the edges of attention, Maeve brewed chicory. When Ira's mind spiraled toward the earlier meeting's chaos, she pressed her thumb between her sister's knuckles, a silent request for compression. Maeve squeezed back, grounding her. By dawn of the 7th day, the last firefly clicked into place. Its glow shimmered, then tempered to pearl as Ira applied the privacy press. She slumped against a support beam. "Done." "Sleep?" Maeve suggested. "Deliver first." Momentum mattered. Delay might unravel her courage. The council reconvened at dusk, the lindens leaves silver in moonrise. Ira presented the modified swarm. Villagers approached, timidly, tried the thumb press, and watched their luminescence fade when desired. Relief softened tense jaws. Even Mrs. Molnar smiled. But another challenge surfaced: commercialization. A merchant from the capital, Mr. Holt, had heard of the fireflies and requested exclusive rights to sell them beyond Brackenvale. He stood now beside Mayor Foran, a waxed mustache curled like punctuation. "Your invention could profit many, as well as enrich you," Holt declared. "Imagine families across the realm bridging gaps of silence with your light." The mayor looked torn between village pride and economic opportunity. Ira's heart accelerated. To tinker in her workshop was one thing. To unleash her devices into crowded cities where nuance drowned under traffic clatter was terrifying. She pictured factory lines altering her schematics, removing safety dampeners to make colors brighter, more marketable. She tasted bile. Mr. Holt mistook her silence for hesitation about wealth. Naturally, we'd provide an upfront sum. Words clogged. She pressed a hand to her chest. Her firefly flash storm cloud gray, the pigment for overwhelm. Maeve spoke gently. "My sister's concern is safeguarding emotional integrity. Mass production risks misuse." Foran countered. "Misuse exists already. Better to guide than forbid." A debate threatened. Ira centered on the rhythmic tap of her fingernail against copper pocket, lining 1121, a pattern that always calmed her. In the quiet it nurtured, she noticed something crucial. The room's fireflies were dim, private mode engaged. People had learned boundaries. Maybe bigger communities could too, if the devices carried instruction and if the maker's intent traveled with them instead of being consumed by commerce. She inhaled deeply, let her gaze lift to the circle of villagers, hopeful, wary, luminous on the inside. She forced words outward slowly, arranging them like gears in correct mesh. Licensing acceptable with conditions, she said. Pause, breathe. Must include privacy clutch, color guide in multiple languages, and training for distributors. No removal of dampeners for brighter sales. Public Stewardship Council to audit factories. Silence. Then Foran nodded. Prudent. Mr. Holt hesitated, perhaps picturing thinner profit margins, yet he inclined his head. We can draft a contract to those specifications. Relief diffused through Ira. The firefly on her wrist pulsed peach, the color of cautious optimism. Rowan stepped forward, hands clasped around her own insect. Mistress Ira, before all this, I didn't dare tell Sherrit how afraid I was to become a wife. The firefly helped me show him more than excitement. It showed the jitters, too. We talked, honestly, for the first time. Whatever happens in distant cities, know you changed us. Others voiced similar gratitude. From the back, Old Tonic raised a paper lantern. His firefly inside glowed deep cerulean. The shade Era had designated for grief finally expressed. Tears wet his gray beard. He gave the slightest bow. The recognition filled Era's chest until it almost hurt. Not the clamor of applause, but the quiet alignment of many heartbeats, each acknowledging hers. She squeezed her fingers together, a private smile blooming between joints. Autumn arrived. Trains carried crates of fireflies to factories that promised faithful replication. Era journeyed to the capital once to oversee production changes. The city's thunderous timbre rattled her, yet she endured by counting street lamps and using the privacy clutch on her own device, letting its purl calm her. She returned to Brackenvale with improvements, filters for colorblind users, Morse code taps for the deafblind, nest docks that doubled as nightlights, as villagers helped test them, offering feedback over cups of spiced cider. The council added a standing committee on emotional artifacts, ensuring community voices guided each iteration. On winter solstice, they held a festival of quiet lights. Snow lay thick, muting sound so thoroughly that every wing beat of each mechanical firefly could be heard as a faint whirr. The villagers gathered around a bonfire, but instead of singing carols, they pressed their devices to purl, standing in tranquil communion. The sky absorbed their breath as columns of vapor and the fireflies' faint radiance echoed the far stars. Ira stood beside Maeve, gloves dusted with snow crystals. She withdrew her own firefly and placed it on her sternum. Under the heavy coat, it pulsed a gentle gold. Content. Not euphoria, not anxiety, simply a warm midpoint. She looked at her sister and tapped her nail to the copper clasp. 1, 1, 2, 1, thank you. Maeve understood. She pressed her forearm to Era's. Across the circle, others noticed the two sisters and lifted their own insects, letting colors bloom now that privacy seemed less necessary. Pale greens of friendship, blues of wistful memory, oranges of courage. The snow reflected them until the whole clearing resembled a low-lying aurora. Era realized then that the ache she had once felt while watching from the granary window had gone. She was inside the pattern now, a cog that clicked in harmony with many others. Not forced into chit-chat or surface pleasantries, but seen through rhythm and light, the language she spoke best. She tilted her head back. Above her, real fireflies slept in winter hollows, and stars flickered with messages no ear could decode. Below, her mechanical insects answered in kind, small beacons of encoded heartbeats. In the hush, Era allowed herself to imagine further possibilities. Beetles that resonated to laughter, dragonflies that mapped breathing to kaleidoscopic wing patterns, maybe even lanterns attuned to shared silences. She didn't know which inventions would succeed or which would test the village's patience again, but she knew beyond any calculations of risk and reward that she would keep crafting, because somewhere between the first spark of solder and the final tightening of a wing screw, she had found a way to turn loneliness into luminescence. An alchemy not even the grandest alchemists of old had distilled. And as long as there were heartbeats, there would be need for conduits of light. The snow whispered against her boots, but inside the circle, everything was warm. Ira closed her eyes, felt her pulse, and let the firefly match it beat for beat, glow for glow, until the difference between machine and maker disappeared in the steady cadence of belonging.